Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
3 years into working retail, you see all kinds of people. But nothing prepared me for what happened with Karen in my old job. I was 22, fresh out of college with a business degree. That wasn't getting me anywhere, so I ended up working at this retail chain I'll call No-op. The pay wasn't great, but it covered my rent and student loans while I looked for something better. The store had your typical retail hierarchy. At the bottom were US regular staff members, then team leaders, assistant managers, and finally the store manager and district manager. I got along well with most people, kept my head down, and did my job. That's probably why what happened next hit me so hard. Karen had been working there for about 2 years when I started. She was one of those people who seemed to charm management effortlessly. The store manager and district manager absolutely loved her. She always volunteered for extra shifts, stayed late when needed, and had this bubbly personality that made customers smile. To them, she was the perfect employee. But the rest of us saw a different side of Karen. We all knew she was stealing, but it was never anything big enough to get anyone in serious trouble. Our store had this policy where your pay only got docked if losses exceeded a certain amount, and Karen was smart enough to keep her theft just under that threshold. Since none of us were losing money directly, there wasn't much incentive to try catching her. Karen's specialty was vouchers and gift cards. You know those promotional vouchers customers sometimes bring in? We were supposed to tear them up and put them in the safe after processing them. There was no official way to count these for the company records, which meant Karen could pocket them and use them at other stores in the chain. Clever, really, if you're into that sort of thing. The day everything changed was Halloween. I was working till number 4, which happened to be the only register in the store without a security camera pointed directly at it. The store manager came through my line around midday with her personal shopping. She told me she'd used some gift vouchers she'd received at a recent manager's meeting when our store was doing really well. I told her that was no problem and processed the vouchers for her. The transaction went smoothly. I processed the vouchers, tore them up when required, and put them in my cash drawer to transfer to the safe later. Nobody else used my register that entire shift because I was the main cashier on duty. When closing time came, Karen volunteered to take all the registers to the back office for the daily cash reconciliation. I thought nothing of it and headed out to meet friends at a local pub for Halloween drinks. I had a great night out, completely unaware that my life was about to get turned upside down. When I came in for my next shift 2 days later, the store manager called me into the office immediately. She told me we needed to talk about those vouchers she'd used at my register on Halloween. When I asked what about them, she explained they weren't in the safe with the rest of the voucher deposits. She said she knew it was my till because she remembered me serving her. My stomach dropped. I knew exactly what this meant. She then offered me a chance to make things right. She said if I just returned the vouchers now, she wouldn't press charges or put anything negative in my file. She mentioned that these things happen and people make mistakes. I insisted I didn't have them and that I put them in my drawer like I always do. She said she found that hard to believe since I was the only one who handled her transaction. The accusation hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd never stolen anything in my life, and here I was being accused of stealing from the one person who could fire me on the spot. I asked if I could look for them, suggesting maybe they'd fallen out somewhere during the cash-up process. She agreed but told me to make it quick. I spent the next hour frantically searching everywhere I could think of. I checked the trash bin under till 4, the dumpsters outside under all the registers, on the floors around the checkout area. Nothing. I was getting desperate when Karen arrived for her shift. She asked what was going on and said I looked stressed. I explained the situation, and she immediately offered to help search. She told me not to worry and said she was sure we'd find them. She walked straight to a spot I'd already searched 3 times, and somehow found the vouchers in 30 seconds flat. She announced that she'd found them and suggested they must have gotten mixed up with some other paperwork. I stared at her. The coincidence was impossible to ignore. I muttered sarcastically about what a coincidence it was that Karen found them immediately, and how convenient that was. I could barely contain my anger. I knew she'd set me up, but I had no proof. The store manager and district manager were just relieved the vouchers had been found. One of the team leaders who'd been watching the whole thing tried to speak up for me. He pointed out that it didn't make sense and asked why I would steal vouchers from a transaction I knew was the manager's, saying that would be incredibly stupid. But it was no use. Karen was their golden girl, and in their minds, she'd just caught me red-handed trying to steal. My reputation was destroyed while hers somehow got even better. That's when I decided this meant war. Over the next few months, I completely changed my approach with Karen. I started being incredibly friendly with her, laughing at her jokes, asking her advice about work stuff. I even started flirting with her a little, making her think I was interested. It took time to build her trust, but I was patient. I knew that if I could just get close enough, she'd eventually slip up. My opportunity came right after Christmas. We had a bunch of leftover holiday chocolate that hadn't sold and was past its sell-by date. Company policy was clear. Expired products had to be thrown away, and taking them home was considered theft. I was bagging up the chocolate for disposal when Karen approached me. She commented on what a waste it was, throwing all that chocolate away, and suggested we should just take it home instead. I said I didn't know about that since it was against company policy. She brushed off my concerns, saying nobody would care since it was just going in the trash anyway. This was my moment. I'd spent weeks studying the security camera angles throughout the store, and I knew exactly where their blind spots were. We were standing just outside the range of the camera that monitored the back area. I told her I didn't want any chocolate, but if she wanted it, she could have it. I deliberately placed a bag of chocolate on a trolley that was just inside the camera's field of view. I watched Karen's eyes when she looked at the camera, then at the chocolate, then back at the camera. She knew she was being watched, but her greed was stronger than her caution. She said she needed to go get her things from her locker. While she was gone, I quietly warned a few of my co-workers not to accept any chocolate if she offered, no matter what. They could tell from my expression that something was up. One co-worker mentioned that I had that evil grin again and asked what I was planning. I just told them to watch and see. When Karen came back, she walked straight to the trolley and picked up the bag like it was her personal shopping. She even had the nerve to offer chocolate to everyone when she walked out, saying she had plenty to share. I watched her leave through the back door, carrying stolen merchandise directly in view of the security camera. I thought to myself that I'd finally got her. The next morning I arrived at work and put on the most serious expression I could manage. I walked straight up to the district manager and told him he needed to check the security cameras for the back door yesterday at around 10:21 p.m. I said I thought he'd find what he saw very interesting. He asked what exactly he was looking for. I looked over at Karen, who was stocking shelves about 15 feet away, then looked back. I told him I couldn't go into details right then, but strongly suggested he review that footage immediately. He seemed annoyed but agreed to check. Within 10 minutes, Karen was called into the office. Within the hour, she was suspended pending investigation. Within the week, she was fired and banned from all stores in the chain. The managers who had accused me of theft came to apologize personally. The store manager said she owed me a huge apology, and that they genuinely believed I was the thief. She said they had no idea Karen was stealing from them. The district manager agreed and said they felt terrible about what happened. He asked if there was anything they could do to make it right. I told them there was actually something they should know. I explained that every single staff member in this store knew Karen was a thief, and that we'd all seen her steal various things over the years. Their faces went white. They spent the rest of the day asking other employees if this was true, and every single person confirmed it. The district manager asked why no one had reported this earlier. One team leader reminded them that they'd tried to tell them Karen was setting me up during the voucher incident, but they wouldn't listen. He pointed out that Karen could do no wrong in their eyes. The management team apologized again, this time for ignoring the concerns of their staff. 6 months later, they offered me training to become a team leader myself to show they valued my integrity. I accepted the training but ended up quitting before I finished the program. I'd found a much better job in an office environment that actually used my business degree. I'm a 30-year-old guy dealing with some challenges that make life interesting. I have autism, Tourette's, OCD, and depression. When I was younger, doctors thought I had ADHD instead. I guess it's easier to tell parents their kid has attention problems than depression. My Tourette's makes me blink and squint my eyes constantly. Plus, I have vocal tics like grunting, chirping, repeating words, and my voice changes sometimes. Lucky for me, I don't have the kind where you swear uncontrollably. I'm what they call high functioning, and I've worked hard to speak well, but I prefer staying home rather than socializing. My life is pretty simple: work and home. At a gas station that I'll call Gas Mart because my boss doesn't like when employees make jokes about the company name, and in my state, he could fire me for it. I do everything there: maintenance, IT work when needed, customer service. That's why they promoted me to manager. Right now, I'm trying to get into their IT department. I'm also a big guy, 6 foot 3 inches and 320 pounds. I used to play football, so I'm built pretty solid. Working customer service for years has made me kind of a jerk sometimes because you see the worst in people every single day. Now, here's what happened on the day that changed everything. The lottery jackpot was huge, $600 million, with another one at $470 million. People were going crazy buying tickets like it was Black Friday. I've been working the register for about an hour and sold almost $1,000 worth of lottery tickets already. We sell two types: online tickets and scratch-offs. The online ones were selling like crazy because everyone wanted a shot at those millions. It was around 4 p.m. and I had a line of 5 to 7 customers, mostly regulars heading to work. That's when she walked in, Karen. I don't know if it was because it was freezing cold January outside, or if she was naturally cold but the temperature seemed to drop when she came through the door. She didn't say hello or even look at me. Just walked right past the line of waiting customers and went straight to the scratch-off ticket display. We don't have one of those fancy electronic dispensers. Our store isn't that high-tech. So I kept helping the customers who were actually waiting in line like normal people do. When I finished with the last 2 customers, 5 more people walked in. Right when I started helping the next customer, Karen's voice cut through the store like nails on a chalkboard. She demanded to know if I was going to help her or just ignore her. Now I've been doing customer service long enough to know how to deal with attitude problems, and I'm not afraid to be a bit of a jerk back. I told her that if she wanted to buy lottery tickets, she needed to get in line like everyone else. My register was over where the customers were waiting. She snapped back that I don't talk to customers that way. I shrugged and told her that customers get in line. She insisted she was there before the other people. I rolled my eyes and told her that actually she wasn't, and like I said, she needed to be in line. She realized her demanding wasn't going to work, so she grumbled and got in line, but not before warning me not to sell tickets 13, 14, or 17 because those were her tickets. I apologized to the next customer in line for the interruption. He just laughed it off and said no worries. Then he looked at me with this sly grin and asked if I could get him an online ticket and 3 scratch-offs, numbers 13, 14, and 17. Karen was still glued to her phone, probably posting on Facebook about how terrible I was being. Here's the thing though, those numbers and marks on scratch-offs don't mean anything. The odds are exactly the same no matter what ticket you get. The customer headed out with his tickets, grinning from ear to ear. He came back about 7 to 10 minutes later with an even bigger smile. Karen immediately started complaining that I had sold her the wrong tickets. She was holding the scratch-offs, looking furious. I explained that I had sold her the next ones on the books. She argued that I hadn't, saying she always checked the numbers and looked for the white marks, and these weren't the next in the book. Then she accused me directly, asking if I had sold her tickets to someone else. I told her it was first come, first served with no reservations. Karen wasn't having any of it. In her loudest, most entitled voice, she demanded to know where my manager was. I decided to have some fun and opened my jacket to show my name tag, telling her I was the manager. She wasn't satisfied and demanded I give her the corporate office number. I handed her the number and she stormed away from my counter to call and complain. That's when the customer from earlier walked back up to me still grinning like he'd won the lottery, which, as it turned out, he kind of had. He announced loudly that the number 14 ticket he bought turned out to be a $200 winner. He said he was cashing it in and calling out of work. He said it loud enough for everyone to hear, including Karen. Her head snapped up immediately. Karen screeched that the $200 was hers. The customer told her nope, sorry, but he bought the ticket so it was his $200. Karen wasn't giving up. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a $5 bill, the cost of the ticket, and handed it to the customer. He raised an eyebrow, took the money, put it in his pocket, and went to cash in his winning ticket. Karen watched smugly, thinking she'd outsmarted everyone. But then the customer dropped the bombshell. He told her that he had bought that $5 ticket with the bill she gave him. He explained that was basically a gift unless she told him what it was for, asking who would trade $5 for $200. Karen's eyes went wide when she realized what he meant. She'd just given him money for nothing, and he used it to buy another ticket. Karen screamed that she was calling the cops. I laughed and asked her why, since she was the one in the wrong. She accused both of us of being drug addicts. That's when I got really mad and asked her how the hell she figured that. She declared it was obvious, claiming I was faking my Tourette's as an excuse to cuss people out, so I must be one of those people who are mentally disabled. She didn't say the exact word, but everyone knew what she meant. That's when Karen made the biggest mistake of her day. She reached out and grabbed the customer's shirt, trying to physically make her point. He wasn't having it and swatted her hand away. By now there were more people in the store who had witnessed the whole thing. Karen started crying and screaming about being assaulted. I told her to leave, explaining that she had assaulted the customer and was no longer welcome in the store. But she wasn't going quietly. She screamed even louder, claiming the customer had attacked her. I'd had enough and called the police. The first officer arrived about 10 minutes later and took Karen outside. A second officer came in to talk to me. He asked what had happened. The customer and I, along with several other witnesses, explained everything. We told the truth and even offered to show the security camera footage, but they said they didn't need it with so many witnesses. The first officer came back inside and asked if the customer had assaulted Karen. I told him no, not at all. She had grabbed the customer and he swatted her hand away. All the witnesses backed us up. The second officer asked if I had told her I have Tourette's. I confirmed that I had. The officers seemed satisfied with our explanations. They did want to see the security footage anyway, just to be thorough. Then they surprised us with some news. They told me they were charging Karen with a hate crime for her comments about my Tourette's. I wasn't sure if that would stick since she had physically grabbed the customer, not me, but it was something. The first officer mentioned that Karen had also claimed I stole $5 from her, but after seeing the footage, it looked more like a gift. With all the witnesses and video evidence, things weren't looking good for Karen. When everything was done, Karen was arrested and charged with several things. The customer, in good spirits, bought another $5 scratch-off with the bill Karen had given him. He didn't win anything this time, but he was still happy about his earlier win. The next day at work, I found out Karen had actually called the corporate office to complain about me. Thankfully, they saw right through her story and dismissed her as crazy. But one of my regular customers is a police officer who keeps an eye out for us at the store. He told me Karen ended up with a drug charge too because she was under the influence when they arrested her. Not really surprising. She'll probably be in jail for a while. We won't know for sure until she goes before a judge, but honestly, after the initial excitement wore off, I moved on. I work in sales, and this particular week was supposed to be the biggest break of my career. After months of negotiations, I finally had a meeting scheduled with a major client that could bring in a contract worth over $200,000 to my company. The meeting was set for 2 p.m. on a Wednesday, and I left my house at 12 p.m. to make sure I'd arrive with plenty of time to spare. What I didn't expect was to spend 3 hours sitting in my car, watching a group of climate activists block the main highway with their bodies and signs. Cars were backed up for miles, and there was absolutely no way around them. I called my client to explain the situation, but by the time the police finally cleared the protesters, it was already 4 p.m. The client had left, and when I called to reschedule, They told me they decided to go with another company. That evening, I was sitting on my couch with a beer, still angry about losing the biggest deal of my year. My wife was trying to calm me down, but I was beyond frustrated. The news was covering the protests, and I was watching the footage when I nearly choked on my drink. I called my wife over and pointed at the screen. There was a guy holding a banner, and I was pretty sure he was our neighbor from Pine Street. My wife looked at the screen and agreed. It was definitely him, the same guy who lived just 2 streets over from us, the same guy who had been causing problems in our neighborhood for months. This neighbor had a reputation for being completely entitled. He would park his car on the public street in front of his house and then get angry when other people parked there legally. He'd actually called the police multiple times complaining about neighbors using his parking spot. He'd also been rude to the mailman, yelled at kids for walking across his lawn, and generally acted like he owned the entire block. My wife could see I was getting worked up again. She told me not to even think about starting a fight with him. I said I wasn't going to fight him, but it was unbelievable that he could block traffic and ruin people's livelihoods while acting like some kind of hero. She told me to just let it go and reminded me that getting revenge wouldn't bring my contract back. She was right about the contract, but I couldn't just let this slide. The next morning, I printed out screenshots from the news footage showing our neighbor clearly visible among the protesters. I walked around the neighborhood, showing the pictures to other people on our street. Everyone recognized him immediately, and they were just as angry. Mrs. Johnson from next door had missed her doctor's appointment because of the same traffic jam. The couple across the street had been late picking up their kids from school. Mrs. Johnson said she couldn't believe he had the nerve to block traffic like that. She said he should realize people have important places to be. I mentioned how he acts around our neighborhood, reminding her of when he yelled at her grandson for riding his bike on the sidewalk. She remembered that incident well, recalling how he said kids shouldn't be allowed in the neighborhood if they couldn't respect property. That's when Mrs. Johnson came up with the idea that changed everything. She suggested that maybe it was time someone taught him what it feels like to be blocked. The more we talked about it, the better the idea sounded. Mrs. Johnson's cousin worked for a construction company, and after a few phone calls, we learned we could rent an industrial dumpster for 48 hours. The cousin's boss had also been stuck in traffic because of the protests, so when he heard what we were planning, he gave us a great deal, just the actual costs plus a small fee. The plan was simple. We'd have the dumpster delivered right in front of the neighbor's house, blocking his front door and most of the sidewalk. It would be positioned legally on the street, so technically, we wouldn't be breaking any laws. 2 days later, the massive dumpster arrived. The delivery truck was so big that we had to coordinate with other neighbors to move their cars out of the way. The driver positioned it perfectly, right in front of the entitled neighbor's house, leaving just a narrow gap between the dumpster and his front door. Once the truck left, we set up folding chairs across the street and waited. Mrs. Johnson brought out a cooler with drinks, and a few other neighbors joined us. We were all curious to see how he'd react. Around 4 p.m., we saw him walking up the street with a huge backpack on his shoulders. The moment he saw the dumpster, his face turned bright red. His wife came out and angrily demanded to know what the dumpster was doing there. She yelled that we couldn't just block their house like that. I apologized and explained that there was a mix-up with the container size we ordered, but told her they could still get to their door. He said this was completely different from what they were protesting, claiming that was for the environment. I pulled out the printed screenshots and told him I had pictures showing him blocking traffic, just like we were blocking him. When I showed him the photos, his face got even redder. He shouted that what we were doing was illegal and threatened to call the police. Mrs. Johnson told him to go ahead, pointing out that we weren't doing anything wrong. He walked into his house through the narrow gap, squeezing his backpack between the dumpster and the wall. We could hear him on the phone yelling at someone. Over the next hour, he came outside 3 more times, each time getting more frustrated. At one point, he got his backpack wedged so tightly between the house and the dumpster that he couldn't move forward or backward. We all started cheering and laughing, which made him even angrier. He yelled at us to stop laughing at him and accused us of harassment. I explained that we were just sitting on a public street and told him he was free to call the police if he thought we were doing something wrong. The thing is, he had called the police so many times over trivial complaints that they knew him well. He'd reported legally parked cars, kids playing in the street, and neighbors having barbecues. The officers were tired of his constant calls about non-issues. The next morning, 2 police officers showed up at Mrs. Johnson's door. She explained that there had been a mistake with the dumpster size and that it would be removed soon. When the officers saw the rental receipt with the neighbor's photo attached, one of them actually started laughing. The officer asked if that wasn't the guy who lives right there, the one who calls them every week about parking complaints. Mrs. Johnson confirmed it was him. The officer said that when the dumpster was gone by tomorrow, they wouldn't need to come back. Mrs. Johnson told them it would be gone. The officers left, and we later found out that the neighbor kept calling the police throughout the day. But instead of sending officers, they just told him his complaints were being processed. Even the mailman got in on it. When he reached the neighbor's house and saw how difficult it would be to squeeze through with his mail bag, he just shook his head and walked away. The construction company came to pick up the dumpster the next afternoon. Mrs. Johnson's cousin delayed the pickup for about an hour, claiming he needed to inspect the dumpster for damage. The whole time the neighbor stood at his window watching helplessly. When the officers returned to make sure the dumpster was gone, they gave both Mrs. Johnson and the neighbor a warning about not repeating the situation. But the damage to his reputation was already done. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.